Well, good afternoon once again, and thank you for tuning in to Behind the Rhyme. I am Pat Middleton, and I'm excited to continue this interview series with poets I know personally. And today we have another dynamic woman who is a poet. She's a writer, she's an author, she's also a photographer, and so much more. Her name is Pamela Blanding Godbolt. Thank you for being with us on this afternoon. I appreciate your yes. And I want you to take about 30 seconds to a minute to just introduce yourself briefly to our listening audience. We're going to dig into the questions, but just to start things off, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm very appreciative of my role I carry, my family role as sister, a mother, and a friend to role as sister, a mother, and a friend to many, So I appreciate those that have helped to carry me through this journey into writing, which is not something that was really on my agenda or plate to do, but I'm grateful that has occurred, and I'm following along the path as it unfolds.
Yes, it's safe to say that writing found you. Writing pretty much chased you down and found you and made you declare that you are indeed a writer. Would that be accurate?
More a perfect storm.
Right there. Why don't you tell us how you came to be a writer?
And this iteration of writing, because I probably did a little as a child because I used to like to read poetry, but this iteration was a perfect storm. As a Tarian, we tend to hold stuff. So in my role as a sandwich generation, responsible as a single parent, and then caring for my parents as they begin to age and put stuff into place, and then working in a job that oftentimes I think we are defined a lot by the work that we do, and if we have a hiccup in that, we may be challenged with identifying who it is that we are. So I found myself working in a space that perhaps helping me to be able to be with my children and almost at any game and everything that they did, as well as make all doctor's appointments for my parents and take care of stuff. But in the midst of that, I kind of really lost myself. And I was at work one day, and I had not recognized how much I had been spiraling until I had like a download and wrote this poem that just came from nowhere. It was like chaos going on in the cafeteria, and I always walked with scrap paper with me. And I penciled this poem years ago in 2015, and I had written 5 poems, all of them coming from kind of like a dark place, like just processing, dealing with pain. And in the midst of that, I remember picking up the phone and calling some friends of mine had someone come in and do some work, some cultural work, to make an appointment. And so just all of those things coming together, caring for my children, my parents, being at a job that I really wanted to close my eyes to the fact that I did and showed up. I didn't want to hold on to any of that. Mm-hmm. And one day, the teapot boiled over. And that's where the poetry started. The teapot boiled over. And that's where the poetry started. I wrote 5 pieces in maybe about that year, or in 2015, 2016. And as far as I was done, that was it. I was done. I wrote those things. It was kind of healing. I'm still today challenged with some things, but I had committed to publishing those 5 poems one at a time in Moonstone. So in Moonstone's 2020, I published for the first time at the insistence of a friend, Maurice Henderson. So that's kind of where the journey started in COVID. While COVID caused and created a lot of chaos in the world, the gift to me from COVID was that they had closed the schools and we were working from home. And I helped a friend. This was Arlene, and then her friend Ron. They both played music together. She's a vocalist, and I had helped Ron to publish. And I was surprised he wasn't published because he was with Victoria in those group with Center in the Park, but he must be the only one that wasn't published. So he published first, and Moonstone or P.A. Bard. And then he introduced me to Center in the Park, and that is when I had the opportunity to meet you and Victoria and Norm. And so that was kind of where my writing was. It was through the love that came out of that space that it grew and developed. Love that came out of that space that it grew and developed into kind of like a writing practice where we would do the challenges. And, oftentimes I never did the challenge when we were doing the challenge. I always had to sit and wait. I was never good at doing stuff right on the money. I had to sit with it for a while, So that's where it started. It started with Center in the Park, and then Victoria and Norm brought me into Writer's Room, which opened up a whole nother realm for me, and I balanced the two. So I was appreciative. I would never have been able to do Center in the Park at 10:30. Because we weren't physically at work, I was able to do that hour and a half with y'all for almost 2 years. And I'm so grateful because you all helped to grow my writing. You all have forced me into the space of identifying myself as a writer and a poet, because I came in saying I'm not a writer, I'm not the traditional writer, I'm not going to tell you all these books that I read and all of these people that I have studied. I didn't come in through that door. That wasn't, the portal that I came into writing.
I love how you put that. It's so many things you say sound so poetic, and you don't even realize it when you say you started with pain and love took over. And then earlier when you were describing the onset of the words, you said it was like the teapot boiled and poetry came out. And so from 2015 to 2020, to kind of ignite poetry in you or reignite. And then you shared 2020 when you became a member through Victoria, me as well, in 2020 of the Center in the Park Poetry Group, which is called Poetry and Discussion. Center in the Park Poetry Group, which is called Poetry and Discussion. And for our listeners, Center in the Park, Philadelphia is located in Germantown, 5818 Germantown Avenue. It's a senior center, and they have many different programs. And one of them is Poetry and Discussion. And because of the pandemic, the sessions took place online, and new members were able to join and learn and contribute and grow. And that's how Pam and I's path crossed. So, Pam, I want to ask you, and then you mentioned the Writer's Room, which is a writing program, one of them at Drexel University in Philadelphia. So between 2015 and 2020, what happened with that teapot? Did it simmer down? Was there any poetry or other writings written within that time period?
Excuse me. Yeah, there were others during that period. And again, all of my first poems were very, very dark, but they were, it was a space of healing. And I've recognized, for a long time that we don't necessarily give credit to the fact that actually love is painful.
It can be very painful, yes.
And kind of like without the pain, it's not the love. When we lose someone, we mourn their absence. We can mourn someone's absence and they still be with us, just as they're changing and or maybe transitioning and towards their path, of leaving the world as we know it. We are able to hold on to them, but it's through that love that we feel the pain. If you didn't connect with somebody in that way, somebody can leave the world and it not phase you in any way.
Absolutely. I've heard it said that grief is love with no place to go. Pain from grief and loss is definitely intertwined with love. Absolutely. If there was no love, there wouldn't be any grief.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Just looking at like those are kind of like the things that might come to mind. And oftentimes I will have a title before I had accompanied it.
Yes, that happens with me as well. I could have a title for months or years even, and some I never do anything with, and some sooner or later the words come. Uh, I want to ask you, Pam, do you write anything now besides Pam? Do you write anything now besides poetry? And I know you do, but share with our audience some of the other things that you write.
I guess my poetry itself is kind of a poet story. Most of my things are telling a story. So I have story. Most of my things are telling a story. So I have grown to write some lengthier poems. I have been known a little in in writers' room for ekphrastic poetry when we had the opportunity. Like, I never thought of being in a museum or the thought of being in the art gallery were never things that I even thought about. So when we went to do a new kind of house where our poetry and photography was in communication with the work of, not the work of, but the collection from the museum at Drexel. When we first walked into the place, I was just like amazed and loved it, and everybody kind of watched how I was engaged in the space. And so I ended up writing, so we had to write towards the paintings that we saw. The ones that we liked the most were the ones that would stay up on the wall, and then the others would come down to make space for the work that Writers' Room was doing. So I landed with 4 writings on the wall and a photo. I did not take the photo, but I supplied the subject. And the photo, I did not take the photo, but I supplied the subject for the photos, which people don't do too much anymore now. And I brought in 1 foot of each of the bronze shoes of my children.
Oh.
And that made it onto the wall. So my first time ever doing anything that was at the level of a museum, I ended up with 4 writings.
For our listening audience, explain to them what an ekphrastic poem is, the connection between the poem and the portrait or photo.
Well, ekphrastic poetry is, or write by music. You could be prompted by a book. You could be prompted by an artifact or a picture, any other kind of form of art, and you in turn create a new art in response to that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so the fact that the photography that inspired your poem is then later placed on the wall right next to the picture in the museum. That is awesome.
Right, and they weren't photos. They were actual paintings. These were paintings that dated back to like the 1800s.
Oh, okay, okay.
To like the 1800s.
Oh, okay, okay. Awesome.
Interestingly, on the wall, trust me, there was not it may have been one black image on the wall. And that was one where it was, they were fording water. Only image where I saw someone where that's the only person that may be a person that was black or a person of color.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is so amazing. I'm going to stop here with the interview questions and give space for you to share 2 poems, and then what we're going to do is pause our interview. But for right now, I would like for you to share 2 poems, and following the theme of our show, give a brief 30-second 1 minute show. Give a brief 30-second 1 minute story behind the rhyme, either before or after you share each poem, of how the poem came to be.
Okay. I'm going to share Unplugged, which was the first download that I got that initiated everything. Unplugged. To avoid the pain I feel in my mind, I choose to be unplugged. To avoid being a witness to my here and now, I choose to be unplugged. I don't connect names and faces in 180 days. because I a person from this workplace into my exclusive club entitled Friends. For it is the lowest my life has ever been. I think it best to remain unplugged. Against my will, I will connect from time to time. I prayed during one of the connections, as God is my source. It happens that he reveals and I get the blessing and the lesson before I unplug again. And that was written in the cafeteria of Spring Garden School. And that was written in the cafeteria of Spring Garden School on January 20th of 2025 at 2:10 on scrap paper and pencil.
Wow. And you said 2025. You meant 2015?
2015, yeah, 2015. So that marks my 10 years of me kind of being in this space. And then this poem, My Black Hole, would be representative of the space that I felt that I was in. And this is what began to leak out. My black hole. On that dreaded day in utter darkness. How did I attract this place? What did I do or not do? All the time I thought my choices, my decisions, to assist here and to assist there, were leading me in an ascending trajectory to later display a slow but steady spiral of dissension. My black hole. My black hole projects ongoing motion pictures of success for which I no longer fit into. World travel, personal and professional growth, achievements, national growth, achievements, love, confidence, joy, contentment, companionship, and relocation and retirement. A continuous bounty of abundance. This is all absorbed by the opposing forces to be allowed to drip into my black hole. Once a committed partner, a team member of an effective but dysfunctional work family, and a contributing member to several professional teams. Now alone, professional teams. Now alone and left to lead. In this lead role, I must harness enough steam to power me and the others who seem to resist movement. There are intermittent glimpses of dim light in the hole up ahead to lead the way. But often the light elicits fear. Fear the light may cause me to burrow deeper into my black hole. As I got here being fooled, I was moving only to discover my black hole houses my mind, my body, and my soul. When true ascension comes, how will I experience the sequence of the slow, steady spiral of descent in reverse? My black hole full too? What will I remember from the journey? Will I truly recover from the journey into my black hole? Will the tear-drenched footprint petals dry? What will I have learned from the course of my spiral journey that will prevent me again from falling into my black hole?
Wow, that's so deep. Oh, I wish we had time to chunk into each verse and discuss. But I want to give you space to share as much of your work. As you can. And so we have time for you to share one more. And I want to ask you to share as well on the other side of our break, to be ready to talk about your involvement, your discovery of, your love for, your teaching of Japanese poetry. Yes, I would like you to dig into that as well. And I also want to pause, Mike, for the last poem and behind the rhyme story. I want to ask you about photography specifically. How did you get involved with it? I'm looking at the Drexel's Writers Room Anthology number 9, 2020 number 9, 2022 to 2023. I'm holding it in my hand. It's 300 pages, and you are the photographer who did the artwork, who did the cover, front, back, and spine of Drexel's. You talk about the connection between poetry and photography for you. It continued not just from you writing poems and pieces that were inspired by artwork, ekphrastic poetry, but also submitting work. So we want to talk about that as well. But so those are the two things we'll talk about on the other side of the break. But right now, I'd like you to share another poem and another piece of the story behind the rhyme.
Okay. A more recent poem that was written in January for a challenge with the PA Bard is a wiser version of myself. Cleansed by the fiery inferno, from the dense dark smoke, oxygen found its way in, reviving me. Oxygen found its way in, reviving me. An inconceivable and horrific reality. The pain that poured like rain, my blood stains remain, marking all the blows I withstood. From the black soot beneath sunflowers, the sparks that fueled each fire's burn, all achieved desires, a temporary state. Life and its desires are ever changing. Life's treadmill never ends. Remember from whence you come, dark smoke. Oxygen found its way in, reviving me again. Breathed in the fresh air. Walk tall, ears alert. The wind, the tree, the ocean, the sun, the rain, the fire. Deliver silent messages. Each has its own musical selection, a song, and a key to life.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. Well, we're going to pause right here and we're going to take a little break right here. And we're going to take a little break and we will be back. Pamela, stand by. I'll be right with you when we go off the air. We'll be right back with more poetic praise, more behind the rhyme with Pamela Blanding Godbolt. Good afternoon. I am Pat Middleton, and we are back with more Behind the Rhyme with our guest poet today. We're going to pick right back up where we start. We're going to pick up where we left off, and I want to start this segment off with, could you share some of your haiku? I'm holding in my hands your chapbook of sorts. It's perfect bound, but it reminds me of the chapbook because it's perfect bound, but it reminds me of the chapbook because it's so intimate. It is synchronicity, salt water, sand, sunshine, breeze, release. And this is from the Pennsylvania Bards? And this is from the Pennsylvania Bards haiku challenge, I believe, back in 2021. This is your first publication that's all you. You've submitted to many and are published in many anthologies. And then we're going to go back to our interview questions.
Okay. In doing so, and sharing from that book, if you would allow me to, I will share something and then share the response that came from it, because I write for myself. I write for myself. And Nadia Coburn is an online writer that I've come to really respect her philosophy and her writing. And she does a piece where she talks about writing using your whole body and learning from your body because the body holds the story and learning from your body because the body holds the stories for us. So I learned that when we write, even if it's for ourselves, we never know what response we're going to get from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So you asked me to speak a little bit about the haikai, that haikus come under haikai.
Okay.
Like 4 types of haikai. And haiku, which is talking about nature and using the 575 philosophy. Senru is talking about human nature, and again using the 575. Zappi and Hoku, those are the 4 variations of haikai poetry. So the book that you reference is a combination of, it's taking into account both haikus and senrus, because in some places I'm talking about mother nature, and in other places I'm talking about human nature.
Mm-hmm.
Only got 25 of those books done. I wish I had done more. I did 25, and I really didn't give them to, I gave them to people who helped me on my path to writing. A lot of family and friends never even saw this book, but I give the book to 4 of the Washington Mandela Fellows that I met in 2022 when I first got introduced to that program, and to their director. I met them on August the 5th, and I said goodbye to them on August the 9th. And on August the 16th, Ben from Zimbabwe responded back to me with 5 writings that came in response to haikus from this book.
Wow.
And at some point I will show them to you so you can see, because he didn't just send me the writing, but it's just laid out. It's laid out as more of a flyer, a gift, and it was called Letters to Pamela. And it's in response to haikus from this book. So they're embedded because he starts with the haiku, and then he tells how it affected him. So he took 2 haikus, and then he tells how it affected him. So he took 2 haikus in one of these. The title of that particular haiku section was called The Innocence of a Child at Play. The light of hope found in the innocence of an infant smile and eyes. The infant smile and eyes. The spectacular interruption of a rainbow to its storm. Dear Pamela, there have been storms in my life before, and most of them have snuck up on me whence I took place when I was 13. One day I was told that I could no longer go to school anymore because there was no money to pay for school fees. In an instant, my dreams and hopes for the future were taken away, because what chance does it after years would pass before I could go back to school? And in this period, hope did glimmer. I did have hope of going back to school and making something of myself. So I started teaching myself from home. One day, armed with a suitcase full of my clothes, I went into town and laid them out at a flea market to sell. Most of them were bought, and I was able to buy more secondhand clothes to sell. There I was, 13, selling secondhand clothes to raise money for school board at home. But there were several spectacular rainbows coming to interrupt my storm. Good things were coming. Eventually, a family friend offered to help pay for my education and GSC SE exams. Wrote the exams, passed, and qualified to go to advanced level. For the first time in years, the light of hope returned, and once more, I had a fighting chance. Regenerating synchronicity, generating, synchronicity, sunshine, water, breeze. And that was sent to me from Ben Jermaine Nakab from Zimbabwe.
Wow.
First Mandela Fellow that I made connection with, and we have not been out of communication since he responded to me in response to the haiku books. He is currently, when he wrote this, he was already at that point. He had already had 5 clinics for men in Africa. He was a law, but then he wanted to bring health care into the community. He is currently, as we speak, at Duke, working on his master's and PhD
Oh,
program.
goodness. That
So
is phenomenal.
yes, to make sure that there was no problem with sharing this, and at some
That's going to be lit, as the young people say. And that's apropos your uh, poem that inspired him, speaking of the light. Yeah, you guys are going to be lit together. But I find that extraordinary. And I just want to commend you because I find that extraordinary. And I just want to commend you because not many people would take an opportunity that they are being showcased to showcase someone else. So I want to commend you for that, introducing us during your interview to him and his that. Introducing us during your interview to him and his work back to you. And you're right. It's moving when the words move through us from our spirit, our hands, our hearts, onto paper and into books and into the hands of other people. But then when they receive, there is something very special about that communication back and forth between writer and writer. So I thank you for introducing us to him, and hopefully at some point we'll see, some of the work you guys do together, and maybe who knows one day being interviewed. It's to me awesome, awesome, awesome. Now, I want to ask you about the photography in the moments that remain. How did you become involved in photography to the point where you are a professional photographer and you have your work has been published?
at Writer's Room, we have, at one of our programs is called Tripod, and indicative of a tripod that holds a camera.
Mm-hmm.
It was based on 3 arms, and this was prior to me getting it, or 3 legs. There are participants that are high school students, and they were from Paul Robeson High School, college students from Drexel University, be they undergrad or graduate, and then the community. And those were the 3 prongs that made up the tripod. And they use writing and photography in storytelling. And, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like under that umbrella that we do the photography.
Okay. And
I
that's
don't,
just for those listening, the writers.
and
Okay. And
I
that's
don't,
just for those listening, the Writers Room is a Drexel University program.
yes,
So I just wanted to let the listeners know that. Okay. We've got 3 minutes remaining, so we really have 2 minutes remaining. So I want to thank you, Pam. For being with us today. And I'm glad that I met you. I'm glad that our paths intersected. Thank you to Victoria, who introduced me to the Center in the Park Poetry and Discussion Group, which is how I met you. You became involved with Center in the Park is through Victoria. Is that right?
I became through Dove.
Oh, through Dove, through Ronald. Okay. So that's great. That's great. I thank you again for being with us today. Pamela is also a member of another writing group that I'm a part of, and that I'm excited to give a little peek into her future involvement with us beyond an author. She will be in charge of the cover design of our first anthology. We've been together 5 years, the Village Authors anthology. We've been together 5 years, the Village Authors. And our first anthology will be coming out this August, and we have asked, and she has said yes to designing our cover based on our theme. And so I'm looking forward to sharing more. That's all I'm going to share at this point. Not going to share the title or anything like sharing more. That's all I'm going to share at this point. Not going to share the title or anything like that. But Pamela is on the move. Her pen is on the move, and her hands are on the move. Not just writing poetry, but also with photography and so much more. Pamela, thank you once again for that remain.
I did make it into PASA, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, as part of Seeing Philadelphia.
Congratulations.
That exhibit is now down, but you could still connect with it by looking either at my name and HYY or my name and Seeing Philadelphia. It'll come up in both instances.
Awesome. Congratulations. Thanks once again for being with us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to Behind the Rhyme. I'm Pat Middleton. Every first, second, fourth, and fifth Saturday, I will be here with local poets and poets from beyond who will share their poetry and the stories behind their rhyme. Thank you so much. Be blessed, be encouraged, and believe.